and I would stamp the name of the youth hostel, Gwydirychaf, on a red ink pad onto the card, and the date that they came in, and when they left I would stamp again the day when they left. Before they left they had to do a job, and I had to inspect the job to see it was properly done, and I was only 14. So I learned to be a figure of authority, and I also stirred the porridge in a big cauldron, stirring like that. And Nan Kinner showed me how to stir the porridge. Nan Kinner proved to be one of my mentors in life. She said I had potential. She took me under her wing. She took me to London in her old Ford car. She took me to places like, what was the name of that place? Never mind, I'll forget it. She took me to places, and eventually she took me to London. She took me to my first ballet, my first concert, my first play in London. And we used to stay at the youth hostels. And because she had a retinue of friends who also did the same type of work, warden of the youth hostel. And she took me to one in a road, and I remember it, called Abingdon Road in Kensington. And I lived in London for 2 years. I worked in London. I got my nursing degree from Birmingham General Hospital from 1950 to 1954. I earned my SRN, my degree, and then I earned hospital certification, and then I became a member of the Royal College of Nurses. And then I moved to London, and I had a friend, and her name was Margaret Thomas. She came from a village in Mid Wales called Cerrig-y-Drudion, and she was a farmer's daughter. She had a brother called John and a brother called Glyn, and she talked about them frequently. And her mother, they were farmers, and I can't remember what farming they did. It eludes me right now. Anyway, I was the leader of the duo, and I said to Margaret, "Come on, Margaret, we're going to London." So we went to London and we got a job. I said, "Come on, we'll get a job at St Mary's Hospital." So St Mary's Hospital's a famous hospital, like all the big London hospitals. Anyway, I didn't like the big St Mary's Hospital, so I moved to the private wing of St Mary's Hospital, where Alexander Fleming supposedly discovered the Petri dish with the sterile patch which had being sterilised with penicillin. So the scientists are not given to boastfulness in the UK. In the opposite direction, they are encouraged to be modest and not boastful. So they didn't claim that they knew anything about this penicillin at Oxford University. So Fleming got accolades that he really shouldn't have had. But there was a wing at St Mary's Hospital called the Fleming Wing, and that's where I worked. And I met a lot of people there. Somerset Maugham's brother had his herniorrhaphy, and Dame Margot Fontaine had her varicosities taken care of. And then I had other private patients. There was a lady, she wanted me to give her a shot of morphia or a codeine or something. I said, I can't give you that. I'll give you a glass of milk. And as a substitute. What's that? Let me see, where was I? I had a patient, his name was Sidney Cumbers. He'd had a stroke. I was his private duty nurse. He was a multi-millionaire, and the reason he was a multi-millionaire was he owned the ink industry in London, and you've got to remember, I'm talking about 1955, and newspapers were still the means of communication, and you had to have a lot of ink for those newspapers. So his father owned the ink factory, or the ink. Sidney Cumbers wanted to be a sea captain. He had one eye, he had a black patch over the other, and he used to call himself Long John Silver. So he had the patch over the eye, he was tall, and I could see he was a bit of a womanizer. Anyway, he was tall, he was married to this woman called Louise Cumbers. And they had an apartment, so we used to call them flats. A lovely flat in Lancaster Terrace, right across from Hyde Park. I have a feeling you went there, Darryl. Yes, but anyway, never mind. So when I went over there one time, so it was a cross, and he had a wheelchair, and I used to wheel him across. And there was a lovely tea garden in Hyde Park, and in the fine weather, sunshine, summer, spring, autumn, the tea garden was open, and we would have tea over there, sandwiches, sponge cake and tea. And I used to go over there with him, and at weekends he had a Rolls Royce, which is a very posh car, and he had a chauffeur. what was the name of that chauffeur? Another illusion. Eluded me. What was his name? Anyway, he had this Rolls Royce, which was like a small room. Very big. Lots of space for your legs. And they used to go down to this place called Gravesend near Tilbury Docks in where all the big sea liners, ships docked, crossing the Atlantic, the QE1, the other big ships. And there was they had a neighbour, his name was, what was his name? I'll think of it. He was a pilot. He used to pilot the boats that led the big ocean liners into the docks. What was his name? Blimey. I'll think about it. So he asked me one day, don't put info in my head. He asked me one day if I would like to go up the side of a ship and pilot one of the boats into Tilbury Docks and then go up the side of a ship. So I said yes. So he called me early one morning, and whether he knocked at the door or called on the phone, I can't remember, but he so off I went with him, and I climbed up the vertical like that of the ship. Ships are curved, and I climbed up there, and it was a rope ladder, and I think to myself, some of the things I've done climbing up the side of that ship, and it was a Finnish ship, and it was the first, there was only one woman on the ship, all the others were men, and that was the first time I saw a sauna, and I had a sauna with this woman. I'd never heard of a sauna, never mind had one. So I had a sauna with this woman, and it was really authentic. I think there were hot coals and steam, and anyway, so I went up the side of the ship and had the sauna, and then we took the ship. Sandy took the ship into Tilbury Docks, or Tilbury Dock, and not far away was this house that the old captain had, who called himself Long John Silver, and the house was called the Lookout. He called it the Lookout. It had one room on every floor, and I think there were 4 floors or 3 floors. There was the dining room and the kitchen on the lower floor, then the living room on the 2nd floor, and then my room was at the top, and there was a bathroom up there, and across the road there were a couple there. What was her name? He was a cheeky fellow. very successful. I can't remember. He started some thing in electronics. What was his name? I was looking at something the other day and his name was on it. She was very pretty, lovely hair. So they lived across there in a house. And in a small graveyard across from their house was Pocahontas, who was married to John Smith. All Americans have heard of Pocahontas. I believe she was a princess, and she married this fellow, and she died in the UK in this place called Gravesend, and her grave is in there, Pocahontas. So I was his private duty nurse, and I travelled in the Rolls-Royce back and forth at weekends to their house, the Lookout, from the apartment or the flat in London. And then the flat in London, there was a cook. They had a cook, her name was Sally. She was from Ireland. I was telling Ben Van Riper about Sally. I said, she reminded me of your mother, Ben. Well, Sally had thin legs. She was scrawny. Have you heard that word, scrawny? Mm-hmm. She was very scrawny, and she used to wear lisle stockings. Lisle stockings are a mixture of wool and cotton, and they were all twisted around her legs. And she used to make this fellow miffed.
Sure.
Almost to the point of being angry.
Explain that.
She used to say, how's himself? How's himself today? And he couldn't stand that uncultured Irish. And so he'd get very, very angry. But she was a marvellous cook, Sally. And that's where I learned to drink gin and tonic at night. Every night it's called happy hour in America. At night about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, the tempo changed, and it was happy hour. So I was introduced to gin and tonic. So what happens now with YouTube?
All right.